Thank you so much for those of us who are joining on recording. I'm sorry, we can do the intro at the end again. So why is mental health really important in combating anti-Semitism? It's not just about preventing long-term effects and PTSD. It's about really creating safer spaces for Jews. It's about prevention for professional burnout. And really, we need to understand the implications on a society level for psychological impact. And why are people falling for the propaganda? What are the methods that they're using to fall for the propaganda, and how this is happening? Because I'm sure, like myself, all of you are watching the news and you're like, I don't get it. Are they that stupid? Do they really mean this? And so we can really explain what's happening on a psychological level. Julie, you want to just introduce the tone for today?
Yes. So what we want to do is we want to be able to acknowledge the collective pain, the war and on IsReal and the atrocities of October 7th have shaken us to our core, and we've been overwhelmed, feeling anxious, angry, and these are normal responses to traumatic events. And there's no right or wrong way to handle these things. But this space that we have here tonight and the other spaces that we've created are here to bring us together. They're here to bring us to a place where we can process these complicated emotions, for us to be able to build resilience and strength and come up with new ways of being so that we can be successful in our lives, in all different areas of our lives. So let's use this tonight as a space to think about our own personal growth and how we can develop some resilience in our mindsets and also gain some new tools to help us build the confidence and clarity that we need for this new year.
Thank you, Julie. And so we have some reflective questions. If you want to take a minute to jot them down or look at these questions, these are the questions I want you to think about while we go through today's presentation. And we're going to do some breakout rooms. How can I honor this year's pain and really learn how to create space for growth and resilience? And we're going to talk about what does resilience mean? And how can I carry forward into the new year and foster healing for myself and foster healing for others? So I really want everyone to just take some time, think about those questions, process those questions, especially for those on the East Coast. It's been a long day. We've had a lot. Let's just take a minute, take a deep breath. Everyone, take a look at this picture and take a deep breath with me in and out. And just try and put everything, all the worries from outside, and just really be able to focus on the energy and the space that we're creating here tonight as a group. We're going to just try one thing before we start the presentation. It's a very simple exercise. I want everyone to take a deep breath with me and exhale. And just to yourself, unless I have a volunteer, look around and identify 5 things that you could see. And take a deep breath in and release. I want you to identify 4 things you could touch. Take a deep breath in and out and think about those 4 things that you could touch where you are. I want you to take another breath in and identify 3 sounds that you could hear. And in and out. And then identify 2 smells that you could smell. In and out. And then take a moment. Is there any taste in your mouth? In and out with the breath. And just really go back to the picture and just focus on that for 1 minute. Okay. Is there anybody who wants to volunteer how that experience was, how they feel now, before and after? You feel more focused and ready to start? Jody, how do you feel?
I'm separating my day from work to now training and being present for our training today.
Thank you, Jody. Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Okay. So the trauma of October 7th is weighing with all of us. And just like all of you, I have been feeling it as well. Our world has not been the same. All of a sudden, things have started to feel a little bit darker and less secure. Before we knew it and could process the news on October 7th, we were engaged in not just one war, but in 2 wars. The war in Israel and the war on anti-Semitism in the diaspora. And it's been ongoing. And I don't think we really had a chance to process. For me, one of the most painful parts was on October 8th when we heard that silence from around the world as none of our allies came to support us. We need to think about how can we move forward and how can we deal with that sense of heaviness, that sense of uncertainty and wondering what's going to be. And there's no other perfect time than in the Hebrew month of Elul For those of you who are with us and who do not know, every month on the Jewish calendar has a different name and a different symbolism. And Elul is all about reflection and starting the new year. And Elul calls upon us to look at the last year and how can you move forward. And this year, I'm going to ask us, how are we going to move forward with so much adversity, with so much heaviness, and with so much going on? How are we going to move forward and how are we going to stay strong? Because as our sense of safety and identity is being attacked, we need to take this time as we set intentions, acknowledge that healing is a process. So one of the three main things when the rabbis talk about Rosh Hashanah is we talk about tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. Tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. But I'm not going to talk about it in the usual ways that you're going to hear tshuva, tzedakah, and tefillah. I want us to think for today about tshuva, not just as repentance, but as a springboard for release. When we teach it to little kids, we teach them often about tshuva as asking for forgiveness. Instead of focus on asking for forgiveness, we're going to look on how are we going to release, how are we going to forgive ourselves, and how are we going to increase our self-awareness. And what do I need to release in myself so that I can move forward? Tefillah means prayer, literally, and I'm not here to preach about prayer. But prayer in the general sense is also a place of grounding and mindfulness. And we don't have to use it in the traditional religious practice, but in a way to reconnect. And tonight, I want you to reconnect to that sense of hope. So how could you use your prayer, your mindfulness, your times of quiet, of reflection, to find a sense of sensibility, even in the uncertainty? Now, tzedakah, which literally means giving money, which is also a great thing to do. We have two organizations that could definitely use it. We're going to talk about giving of ourselves and having compassion for ourselves and compassion for our fellow people in our family and our community. We want to be able to give back to support others. How can giving, whether it's time or resource or emotional support, how could that be part of our healing process? And how is that going to work? So I want to take the Rosh Hashanah framework and use that to really spring forward. Does anybody have any questions about those pieces for now? So I'm going to start with a definition of trauma so that we're all on the same page. The definition of trauma that we're going to work with today is just simply the subjective experience of feeling out of control, unsafe, and overwhelmed. Okay? It's that sense of safetyhood that's been shaken to the core. Trauma is not necessarily what happened, but it's how our body and our mind processes what happened. There's so many different types of trauma. I just want to really explain and define what we're focusing on tonight. Tonight, we're going to focus on something called active trauma, because every Jew from around the world since October 8th, it's been an active trauma. For some, it's very large, and for some of it's a little bit small. But the trauma is not over. And what's the difference between a collective trauma and a communal trauma? We've all experienced collective trauma. Collective trauma was a lockdown in COVID. For me, my first collective trauma was 9/11. I was involved in 9/11 and the ground zero debriefing with FEMA and Red Cross. But a communal trauma was when it's specifically targeted at a community. And this is what we're here to process, our active communal trauma. And there's vicarious trauma. It may not be happening to us. We may not be on the college campuses. We may not be in the hospital settings. We may not have all the different, I personally get a lot of cyber hate, but we know that it's happening. We know that all these things are happening. And we know that, again, it's all part of it. And what does that do to us when we see it and we feel it and so forth? And then on top of that, we have our intergenerational trauma. We as Jews, we have 4,000 years of intergenerational trauma. And how does that play into what we're talking about? Complex trauma is a term that's thrown around a lot. It's really when there's many different traumas together and one hasn't been healed. And then we have the succession of small things happening together. And they could really, even though each one by themselves doesn't seem that significant, maybe it's how they pile up on top of each other. So let's focus on this active trauma. And I feel like this is a really good embodiment right now of what it feels like to be a Jew post October 7th. It's all this buzzing, this feelings, this cloudiness. And it refers to this ongoing trauma because we haven't reached safety yet. We don't know when it's going to be. And it's something that we've all been feeling and we all know it in our core. The main things that can really trigger a trauma response seem really obvious. Like if a doctor stood in front of you and said, let's get exercise, get enough sleep, drink enough water. We all know that's common sense. And I think this is common sense, but we have to bear repeating. Validation, support, and safety. Validation, support, and safety. Those are the critical things that everybody who's going through something difficult needs. But what happens when safety hasn't been reached? That's when the trauma is still active, but we could still get that sense of validation and support. How does trauma affect us? Trauma affects us in every single area of life that you can imagine. And what's happening here is we're going to call it clinically, it's really called prolonged toxic stress. We're not in Israel, unless there is somebody in Israel on, I don't know. But all these things building up together, and it can affect every single part of us. For some people, we feel it in the body, and Gina is going to really specialize in that piece. For some people, it's more cognitive in our thoughts. Shows up in our relationships. And I think the relationships is one of the biggest pieces we have to talk about, because there's just a deep sense of betrayal from a lot of our non-Jewish friends who were silent, who didn't stand up, and even worse, started to point fingers at us and started to justify the horrific acts. So our past traumas could amplify our current traumas. So when trauma goes on top of trauma, it just could really wind up looking like this shattered bottle. Do I have a volunteer who wants to read the screen? Any volunteer?
Sure. The breaking point of silent wounds. Small cracks form, too slight to trace. From stones of hate through time and space, each one grows, the glass grows weak until the break is loud and deep.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it. Everyone, put your hands out in front of you. This is kind of like your vessel that you were given. No, like a vessel in front of you. What I want to explain is that negative energy takes up almost twice the amount of space than positive energy. So if you can imagine when you go around your day, our job is really to fill it up with as much positive energy in our vessel that we are given as possible. Because as these little pebbles that might seem innocuous build up, eventually we hit our breaking point. And then how does that impact us? And how does that impact our Jewish identity? First, it was one negative comment. I posted this event on Facebook, and I got a lot of pro-pallies writing all sorts of wonderful things about our event tonight. They don't just want to ignore it. What I am concerned about, and one of my focal points of my work for the last 6 months, is about the destabilization of our identity and how that works and how are we going to rebuild our identity. When people talk about anti-Zionism, Israel, they're not really just talking about it, because what does Israel represent to almost all of us? Our sense of, you could shout it, what does it represent?
Identity. Who we are.
Our safety. When was Israel created? It was created right after the Shoah, after the Holocaust, as a safety net, as a place for us to flee if our home country isn't safe for us. So attacking the definition of what Zionism means and changing it to something that's dirty and evil, what does that do to our identity? So I came up with a new concept. I call it the anti-Semitism of identity destabilization. And what that is it's really that deliberate defamation of Jewish individuals and institutions and communities for the purpose of undermining credibility and self. And the way it's done is really through gaslighting and macro gaslighting. Because what we're seeing right now is a macro gaslighting. The basic definition of gaslighting is power and control and manipulating facts. And when you have all these pieces together, it could really stimulate that trauma response. When they try and erase our identity, the denial of our history, we have this existential fear of our safetyhood. Even when people are debating me, oh, the anti-Semitism isn't that bad. You're not this color. You're not in that group. It's not that bad. Denying our Jewish connection to Israel. They're trying to erase our identity and destabilize us. And for some people, it can create a lot of internal conflicts, especially if your identity was not stable beforehand. For others, it can create a sense of betrayal, like who could I trust, and paranoia. And you could see even in the Orthodox communities, what's happening is people are becoming more insular and more radical of not wanting to mix out. And that's very sad. And that kind of emotional distress, especially our changes in social status, maybe we were part of a group. Raise your hand if you were kicked out of any kind of group, whether it's a social media group or any kind of group since 10/7. I think, Sonia, you and I were kicked out of the same therapy groups, right? Yeah, you were, because we talked about it, right? I know Sonia from before. How did it feel when you got kicked out of that group?
I don't remember. I got kicked out of a few. So I think I was really upset, but not shocked.
Well, we should be shocked. It's not these are professional groups. Anybody else have any experience of betrayal they want to discuss or feel comfortable discussing?
I'd like to join in. Hi, everybody. I'm Marjorie Adam Clark. I'm just happy to be here, but I am of Haitian descent. And the whole idea of Haitians eating cats and dogs was really something to deal with, particularly when I look back when before Haitians were the reason why America had AIDS. And so that was something that's really kind of hurtful for me right now. In addition to, I am a believer, and to know that 81% of white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump was difficult for me, as a person of faith. So I just wanted to share those things. And I'm happy to be here. I am a founding member of the Illinois Juneteenth Committee, and I work around a lot of healing around racial identity. And I'm just happy to be here to learn more about anti-Semitism, because I definitely can see some parallels and things like that. So just really happy to be here and to support you, Malka.
Oh, I love you, Marjorie. Thank you so much. So one of the things I'm just going to ask is we're going to try as much as possible to not talk about politics. I know it's really hard. We're just going to try and not talk about politics. We're just really going to focus on the emotional response. I really want to point out some of the things that we want to look for in ourselves and for others, because active trauma, I've been saying this since COVID, acts like a magnifying glass. So there may have been something that we already worked on, but it's going to come out a little bit stronger. It can be a relapse trigger for people that work in addictions or cutting or eating disorders. It could really bring out issues in people's relationships. It could bring it out stronger. But I do want to note, when you look at this list, this is overwhelming, and everyone's going to feel a little bit of it at different points in time. But what I'm really am concerned about is when we talk about it in terms of duration, frequency, and intensity. If the duration, the frequency, and the intensity becomes to a point where it's impacting your interpersonal relationships, your ability to function at work, or your ability to daily function, that's where we think you should maybe take a pause and have a consult with a professional. And thanks to our partnership with Mental Health IsReal, I think Rona's not here anymore, but you could have those 5 sessions for free. And we also, Kesher Shalom is partnered up with OK Clarity, which is basically like a Psychology Today for the Jewish population. So we have all these different things. Take a note and think about. I want to just take a moment to talk about resilience and the concept of door vador. Who knows what Kol Dor Vador means? Does anybody know what that means? Kol Dor Vador? In every generation, right?
From generation to generation, yeah.
Thank you. From generation to generation, I want us to think about the generations before us and how our Jewish roots are strong and they're diverse. That's why I love this tree, because it really, one of the things, when we talk about taking away our identity, this idea that Jews are white is not true. We are a multi-ethnic, multicultural peoplehood. And I want us to think about how our Jewish roots of resilience are strong. And they've been going on. It's not intergenerational trauma. It's intergenerational resilience and strength. So does anybody know where the original word resilience came from?
Can you repeat again?
Does anybody know where the origins of the word resilience came from?
Mm-hmm.
So some people say it's a Latin word, but I think it was originally used in engineering for the idea that you put pressure on something, it will bounce back or jump back. It'll jump back to normal. So if you have enough rubber and you put a pressure, it jumps back to normal. And that's basic resilience. But when we talk about resilience and trauma, we're talking about not just bouncing back. We're talking about going through and becoming stronger and more powerful because we've been through something. So it's this ability to navigate through diversity and tragedy and threats and be able to challenge it and be able to have that flexibility. It's not just becoming, it's overcoming. It's not just thriving, it's surviving. And I think this is a really important piece that I want us to look at. I'm going to just take a minute to tell you an interesting analogy, and then we're going to move forward. You could take, we had our jar, but now imagine our jar is this very expensive vase that is sold on auctions for millions of dollars. And I smashed the vase. It was a Chinese legacy, and it's all shattered all over the floor. We have a choice. We could give in, or we could put it back together. And I used to tell people, okay, especially when I worked with couples and infidelity, okay, we could put it back together, we can make it work, but you're right, it was never the same. But in Japanese culture, we fill that vase with 24 karat gold, and then it becomes even more valuable on the market. And it becomes something that's even more stronger because what they recognize is that process and that journey of putting all the pieces back together had to have made you a stronger person. So that's where we want to start looking as like, how can trauma be transformed? We have mashuber versus tikkun. Mashuber is the Hebrew word for crisis, and it's like a breaking down. But we have also the Hebrew word for tikkun, which is a repair or a fixing. We're never going to be the same once we've gone through something, but we have a choice of how we want to come out on the other side. Do we want that fixing? Do we want to come out stronger with more role clarity, more purpose, optimism, and perseverance, and a deeper appreciation for life? Or do we want to sink into the hole of depression and despair? And we don't have a choice. But the more we go through life, we've gone through stuff. That's a little bit also why the older you get, the wiser you get, because we go through stuff and we become stronger and we know how to navigate things. And we are obligated as Jews to look at it from a sense of tikkun. I love this quote. There's nothing more whole than a broken heart. It's from one of the Rebbe's, one of the Hasidic Rebbe's. And why is that? Because once a heart has been broken and put back together, it's stronger, it's more resilient, it's more able to have the ability to manage challenges. And why is it that most of the world will understand the PTSD? Who knows about PTG? Why are humans so clinging to the negative? Remember, I told you the negative takes up double the space. Why is it our human nature wants to cling to the negative? Today, I want you to cling to the positive and think about post-traumatic growth. And how are we going to grow? And what are the 5 factors that are going to bring that growth? We're going to talk about mindset tonight with Julie. We're going to talk about accepting our emotions and our situation. We always talk about leading with kindness. The more kindness you put into the world, the more kindness comes back at you. A sense of humor, strong sense of community, and finding the purpose and meaning. And for any of you who will come to some of my longer trainings, I do a lot on purpose and meaning from logotherapy with Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. But guess what? All these things for PTG are in our Jewish traditions. Isn't that amazing? They're in our Jewish traditions. We have a concept of tikkun olam, of repairing the world and community service. And that is a really good place to transform our trauma. We have in our traditions a sense of relaxing and reflection and taking a break. I'm not saying that you have to keep Shabbos like an Orthodox Jew, but I want you to really think about taking that time to unplug a little bit and just take away from some of the things on the everyday. Judaism was the originator of mindfulness practices and coping tools. We have the idea of setting our intentions in the blessings that we make. You know, I don't know if people are aware, there's blessings for every food and drink that we drink. It's the idea of taking, and when I take mindfulness trainings, they're like, be very intent on every sip of water you take. And I'm like, oh, check, I already do that. But a lot of these things are in our traditions. And I just think that's like a really amazing thing. I want you to draw into our traditions and draw strength from it. The acts of love and kindness and the wisdom of intergenerational heritage. And then together we have this hope, this unity, this avat Yisrael, love for each other because we are one people. And together, that's how we're going to rise above and we're going to be stronger. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. Does anybody have any questions about what I covered so far? This is a good time to ask any questions or comments or thoughts.
Is it okay to take pictures of the slides without showing faces?
You can, but if you're going to replicate it, please ask permission first.
Yeah, no, just for self.
Okay. Was there anything that hit you or was different from what I gave over so far?
When you first asked the questions of reflection, I didn't get that. So I wondered if it happened again, if I could.
Okay. I'll share the reflection questions right before we do the breakout room. That's a good point. Okay.
Malka, Jody has her hand raised.
Yes, Jody.
Malka, I really liked how you just talked about the connection between Judaism and therapy, because a lot of the tenets of Judaism were based on the beginnings of therapy, and many of the people who started therapy, Freud, and a lot of the founding fathers happened to be Jewish. And those, bringing in like what mindfulness is and all of the wonderful parts about what Judaism is why we are such a strong community and why through adversity, we always thrive. And I think that's such an important part that you brought in today for people who may be on here who are not Jewish, is that there's always this sort of like, I'm thinking the anti-Semitism, like what must they be doing that they're still around, that they still want to be a part of this? And I think that comes from our resilience and our community, and our basic tenets allow for a beautiful, thriving society. And I'm glad that you mentioned all of those things.
Thank you. Because that was the first time I've actually, as I said, that I've been teaching continuing ed classes and training professionals. And I don't always, it's really only since 10/7 that I've been combining my Jewish knowledge with my therapy knowledge. And it's a little bit of a unique thing. And I hope that you guys continue to come to different things. I also go over the trauma responses in terms of Jewish history as well. So there's a lot to think about. When I train non-Jews specifically in anti-Semitism, I am very strong about that. I don't want to present Jews just in terms of our persecution and our discrimination. I want people to know who we are and really understand our value system, because the more you know somebody, the more you're going to have compassionate empathy. The more we create compassion and empathy in the world, that's how we're going to combat anti-Semitism. I'm not going to sit there screaming and yelling at somebody who's not going to listen to me, but I want to create this compassionate empathy. And how do we do that? Is through education. We want to educate people who we are, educate people what some of the real definitions of things are, and the impact, the psychological impact. And we do have a course that's going to really go into how anti-Semitism not just impacts the Jew, but how it impacts society. And it's pretty scary. I call it the domino effect. Does anybody else have any questions about what was just presented? I know we have a rabbi on, so I'm going to pick on Rabbi Eli. Do you have any questions? Rabbi Eli wrote a beautiful article about Kesher Shalom in Jerusalem Post. So thank you so much.
Oh, that was
Thank you, Malka. I just have one thing to say, and that is if you know who you are, if you know your history, if you're educated to be proud of your past, both the good and the bad, then I think the effect of those who want to deny who you are, their attempt is much less effective because you know who you are, and you're not going to let somebody rob you or intimidate you and steal your identity.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to our amazing Gina Ross, who I'm so excited to be working with and now get to call her a colleague of mine. I went to one of her trainings and been following her through the Nefesh, which is a Jewish mental health association. I'm going to let everyone turn our attention to Gina so that she's going to give us some actual hands-on skills.
okay. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. And Rabbi Kavon, I think I totally agree with what you're saying about the identity. So I'm going to bring you something called emotion aid, which is a byproduct of somatic experiencing, which is a body-mind technique to heal trauma. And we took the very basic concepts and turned them into a tool that people can use on their own. I have a video of 15 minutes that will be sent to you. Can you place it, Malka, can you put it in the chat for people? Or send it also by email after? So I'm just going to give you some of the basic points, but this is something that we have in a video in English, then a video in English and with transcription in Hebrew, translations in Hebrew. Then we have 7 audios in 7 different languages, including English and Hebrew and Arabic and Spanish, etc. And then there are manuscripts that you can download so that you can read over and over and really get to know the material very well. And then if you go down on the page, on the YouTube page, there is also a puppet for children with a ventriloquist. It's really interesting. So, and this is to be sent everywhere. Anything that you can do is for free. It's something that my institute has created for Israel. And when COVID happened, we just decided to give it to the whole world. And we added the other languages that I knew that I spoke. So we are always ready to do more if people take it on to translate the stuff. Okay. So very basic, very, very basic. The first thing in the video, there are 4 exercises how to ground yourself. So anybody, whether it's you or a child or somebody who's very upset, something just happened, there are news that are going on all of the time. Bad stuff is happening. Every day we hear one more thing. We are an ongoing threat, and Israel is an ongoing danger. And as individuals in the community, we also are. So this tool for me is a must, because we know now that trauma and stress affect the autonomic nervous system. And when our autonomic nervous system is dysregulated, we are not functioning at our best. And this is the time where we have to function not only our best, but our absolute optimum, because we're needed more than ever to take over and do something we were never able to do historically before, which is to defend ourselves. And for that, a lot of us who have forgotten to make their Jewishness as the front burner of the identity is what we have to do right now, is own our identity, be proud of it, work according to what the Torah has given us as a role in the world, as a role for ourselves also in terms of our development. And the project that we have, the model that we have developed and that we're applying in IsReal is to really heal at the collective level by taking this instrument to 10 different social sectors that interface with trauma. So the first 4 are about grounding yourself. So when something is too upsetting, it's overwhelm. This is the word that kept coming back from the description from Malka, is about overwhelm. And so they're very simple and very effective, okay? Basically, when we're very upset, it's all in our body. At that moment, particularly at that moment when we're overwhelmed, we want to get out of our body. So there are 2 things. I'm going to show you the butterfly hug, which is you cross your arms, do it all with me, okay? And you tap alternatively. You can do it on your arms or you can do it on your legs. The same thing. You can do it on a kid's leg. If a kid is really acting out and really upset, you just tap. So you tap 25 times alternatively. Then you stop and you take a deep breath. And you assess where you're at. If you feel that you're still on total overwhelm, you do another set of 25 times. And again, you stop and you take a deep breath. And you may need to do 2 or 3 sets of that. That will immediately calm you down enough to continue to do the rest of the work that I'm going to show you. So that's the butterfly hug. Now, let's say you have somebody is in public and they're this kind of weird to do that. It's enough to just squeeze your arms. As long as the movement is alternative, it's enough. That's really what the brain needs to put the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain together to start working again together. That is one of them. The other one, do it with me. Feel your feet on the ground. Imagine that you're sending roots into the ground and see how your seat is receiving you at the hip level and at your back. And then look around the room and choose to do this. Either count 10 different textures or 10 different shapes around the room. Just do it right now. Yeah, okay. What do you notice happen? If one of you can share, that would be fine. Do you feel that you became more present? You can say yes or no, depending on what happened. Yeah? Like Marjorie and Abigail is doing, and Jody too. Okay. So that's a very, very immediate thing. I was working in IsReal with the missiles falling, and we go to the parking lot as the mamad, as the safe room, and people were coming from the bus, from the street, coming down there, and very, very activated. And just with that, within 3 minutes, I would be taking them out of the excess arousal and the overwhelm that they were feeling. So that's very fast. Okay. There are 2 others. And so you can look at them and do the 4 of them and choose which one is good for you or which one is good for your clients, by the way. If you're a therapist, this is what you're doing also with your people. Now, here's another thing that is wonderful. What we know is that when we're upset and we're hyperactivated, hyper-aroused, overwhelmed, that means that there's a lot of stress hormones coursing in our body, right? So we have adrenaline and cortisol. Here's an immediate way to change that. If you think of a resource there's an immediate production of oxytocin in the body. So one of the things that you want to do is create an inventory of resources. So normally, when you go home when you finish today, you're all home, probably, you make a list of 12 to 15. You can do that with your kids. You can do that with your clients. You can do that every member of the family. A resource is anything, an object, a concept, an internal quality, external activities, anything at all that helps us feel calmer and stronger when we think of it. We don't even have to imagine doing it when we think of it, okay? And it has to come at no cost. So if I'm smoking to calm myself down, that is not a real resource because I'm paying a price for it. That's not good for me. So we want healthy resources. And here's what we do. All of you right now, please choose one resource. Think of one resource. If you want to write it in the chat, that's fine. And here's what we do. That is what's special that we do in SE and in Emotion A. Because everybody now knows about resources and understand that. We ground the resource in the body. So as you think of the resource like going outside or receiving or giving a hug, for example, those of you that wrote it, just notice what happens in your body. Take a moment and check. And when I say in the body, I mean sensations like, is there a sense of expansion? That's right, a deeper breath that comes in? Is there a sense of flow? What's happening? Is there like a letting go of the stress in the shoulders? What's happening in your body? Your face, smile, etc. Exactly. So what happens if you make a list? This is really precious. And you write each resource on a piece of paper and you fold it and you put it in a jar. And whether you or your client or your family or anybody around you is feeling out of sorts, they pull out a piece of paper from that jar, open it, look at it, ground it in the body. They do that with 1 and 2 resources. They just shifted where the intention of their attention is, where the direction of their attention is. Chick-chack in a moment. This is something that's possible to do. So I'm thinking, for example, you're sitting on a Shabbat dinner, and let's say you imagine to say, well, what was the best thing that happened to you today? Or what was the most fun thing that happened in school the whole week? So immediately now you shifted the whole system around you towards thinking of resources. And the moment you think of resources, you're now bringing oxytocin, which is the happy hormone, into the body. So that's a very, very quick chick-chack manner of shifting something, okay? The third thing that I want to leave you with, and that is the miracle. Like we don't understand why that happens, but that's the miracle of SE. But it's actually not the miracle of SE. This is from Borei Olam, from Hashem, that gave us a nervous system, an autonomic nervous system that is capable of getting aroused and discharged on its own. And then it gets blocked. And what SE figured out to do is to help it to work again. So we talk about an inherent, built-in, we're born with capacity to heal that we call the healing vortex. And this is how it works. If I think about an event that's upsetting, I notice all the sensations that are coming up in my body. And then I choose only one. If I put my attention on all of them at the same time, I am going to get overwhelmed. That's what trauma is all about. Overwhelmed because too many things are coming on together in my body, in my brain, in my feelings, in everything. Yeah? So what I'm going to do, that's called titration, but don't worry about the word. I'm going to choose only one sensation at a time, and it does not matter which one. And I'm going to just focus my attention on it in a very neutral way. No judgment, no criticism, no evaluation. If I occupy my neocortex, the miracle is not going to happen. The magic will not happen. If I empty my brain and just notice, let's say my heartbeat is very loud and very strong and very fast, I just close my eyes, Notice the heartbeat. And the next thing that happens, my body by itself, my body, the healer, will bring something that will release that sensation by itself. There are 7 signs of release. A deep breath, diaphragmatic breath that comes up on its own. I don't want the voluntary breath. I call it the reptilian breath. It has to come up by itself. Yawning, trembling and shaking, but the one that feels okay, not the one that's very unpleasant. Warm sweat, heat wave, gurgling of the stomach, and goosebumps. Any one of those, that's bizarre. We're not spending our time checking what our body is doing, right? But then once you start doing it, you see, oh, wow, my body just discharged on its own. And all it required was my neutral attention, focused only on one sensation at a time. Then I go to the next one and the next one and the next one. I discharge all of them. Then I can go back over the event again. This is what you will see in the video. And I notice if there is more charge still that's there around that event. Very likely there'll be still some left, not as much as before. I will do the same work, discharge each sensation by itself, then go over the event again until there is no more charge. Now, here's the amazing thing. If I discharge my nervous system from what we call the stuck energy, my brain starts thinking in the right way. If I started with a negative belief system, all of a sudden I'm thinking in the right way. Now, normally you heal trauma when the trauma is over. We are in an ongoing chronic traumatization and activation. So we think of something that we call, and also there's cumulative trauma. It just keeps adding and adding and adding until we cannot take it. So what we want to do is work with relative safety, which means at the moment that we're working on ourselves, on that moment, we're safe. We're in our house. Nothing is happening. That is the time that I take to empty my autonomic nervous system from any leftover extra activation. And then I'm starting at homeostasis, and I have a much bigger container to handle what's coming my way. And a lot of bad stuff is coming our way right now. We need a huge container. Not only we need to be able to cope, we need to become heroes. This is a time for Jewish heroism. And what I can tell you, there's a reenactment of the pre-Holocaust time, but with the difference that this time we can go for global healing by having us do what we couldn't do before, by using the ally and the friends that we have, because we do have them, even if there's a lot of negativity, and by convincing the people who are negative that this is their opportunity for redemption. I have a whole article written about that. I'm trying to work with the Israeli government about it, but this is our time truly for heroism, not for sentimentality, not for emotionality. It's like, yes, we have them, but we need to clean them up. We need to get back to a bigger container and to rely on what I told Malka the other day, that hope is our middle name. Historically, we have overcome way, way, way worse situations than what we have right now. And there's no reason for us not to overcome this one, but with a bigger plan than that. Not only to overcome, but to change something drastically in the world. There is not for nothing that all of the world is looking at us. We have a tremendous role to play, and we have to take it over, and we have to deserve it, and we have to work for it. That's it. You can look at the video, and you can reach out, Gina@ginaross.com, if you're interested in anything. We have a whole bunch of books that are for every single social sector that we identified. We also have emotion aid trainings of 1 day for the public and 3 days for therapists. And of course, there's the SE trainings too. Right now, I'm running one specifically for the Orthodox community. Malka, did you put it in the chat? She put it
I
in the
did.
chat.
I think what
Yeah.
we're going to do is there's going to be a follow-up email.
Be in the follow-up email
We'll be
too.
in the follow-up email. So what we're going to do is we're going to save the breakout rooms for the end
Right.
right now. I do want people to know that we're going to put in the chat room the link to the feedback form because that's really important. So if we want to see other programming happening, what other kind of programs we want to see happening. But I'd like to call on Julie Riga because the other part that we really wanted to talk about is setting intentions for the new year. Thank you, Julie.
Okay, thank you so much, Malka. And this is an interesting activity. I thought we would have a little bit of fun with this. I would like you to tell me about this watermelon. And if you have been in one of Malka's or my trainings and you've seen this, please refrain from going there because you probably know about this watermelon. But tell me about this watermelon. Has anybody not seen the square watermelon before? Okay, cool. So maybe you can play this with me a little bit. Tell me what you think what is this for?
It's like a gift wrapped up.
Oh, it looks like a gift wrapped up. It's interesting. Anybody else? How much does this watermelon cost?
Like hundreds of dollars.
Hundreds of dollars. Thank you.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. The watermelon doesn't exist.
A square watermelon.
It doesn't exist. It's never been made before, right? Perhaps. If it does exist, where is it grown?
Japan.
Japan. Anyone else?
Makes me think of it growing with some walls around it and restricting its shape.
That's interesting. Very, very interesting. Anybody else? Does anybody want to tell us the origin story of this watermelon or any other story that you might come up with?
Mm-hmm.
Or no, to be true.
I think they were grown so they could fit more of them side by side.
Wow. Okay, cool. Where do you think they sell these watermelons? Did they sell them somewhere?
China. They package them probably.
Package them and they ship them out? Did they sell them in a store of any kind?
Probably.
No, they sell it at just at a cubed watermelon store.
They
There's
have a cubed watermelon store they sell them at.
just one in the whole world.
It's just called the Cube.
Yes.
That's what it's called. Okay. So let's reveal the origin story of the watermelon.
They're from Japan.
So
Hello.
they are from Japan. Somebody must
Yes.
have done the research. Who went online and looked it up? I'm
Me.
sure. Yeah, that was not what we were doing. This is not what we were doing. We were not Googling the watermelon. Okay.
I did.
So anyway, the watermelons from Japan, they're grown in square boxes and they're carefully shaped while they're grown. The price of it's about $100 a watermelon. They sell them at supermarkets and it lasts for a year. The watermelon can last up to a year. They're perfect for gift display. They're popular for gifts, but it's a labor-intensive process that requires constant monitoring. I'm just going to mute everybody while I'm speaking. And they're not edible. That was a question I was supposed to ask. Are they edible? These watermelons, you can't eat them because they are harvested before ripening, making it inedible but visually stunning. And it's rare and stylish. It is a novelty item that stands out. So that is the square watermelon. But where I was going with this is we can see something and tell a story about it, even if it's true or not true, because our imaginations will tell us a lot of different things, unless you're actually Googling the watermelon and then you're finding out the true story. Next slide. So it's a little bit like our stories. Our stories shape our actions and our thoughts, and the stories we tell get in the room before we do. And so some of these stories we tell stop us from doing the things we want to do. They can cause us to have a lot of anxiety and stress. We can make things worse than they actually are by telling these stories. And by choosing a different story, we can empower ourselves to gain more control and emotions. And we can also reflect by asking ourselves, is this story going to empower us or disempower us? And so thinking about those stories are very interesting. And really getting to a place where we understand what is our role. What is the story we're telling ourselves? I always love to say this. The story you tell yourself about yourself is the most important story you will ever tell. So what is the story? Are you a survivor? Are you the author of your life? Are you the hero of your story? If you pick those stories, they become empowering. But if we choose some other stories, like the villain, the helpless person, or potentially the observer, there's nothing I can do, what happens is we become a prisoner of our own story. So it is something that we want to be thinking about. And the question I want to ask today is, can you create a new story? So what is the story you can tell yourself about the problem? Naming the problem. Our language matters. Externalizing it reduces blame and guilt, shifting the focus to resilience, and rewriting the narrative towards empowerment. And one of the stories, before you move on, that my family has told is that I have a very diverse background. My mother is Jewish and my father was Italian Catholic, but we are a family of Holocaust survivors. And so my mother says to me recently, she says, Julie, I'm glad your name is Riga. They won't know you're Jewish. And that story, they won't know you're Jewish, is still happening in my life, in my story. And so how can I change that story? How can I change that we're afraid to actually tell anybody who we are? My grandmother, till she died, she was so mad at me. I wrote in the story, I wrote a book. And in the book, I wrote that she was from Russia. And she was so mad at me. I'll never forget how mad at me she was. But it was the story that she never was able to change that story. Even though she lived in America, she escaped all of that, came to America. She wasn't able to change her story. But how can we today change that story? Things are a lot different now, and we cannot go back to the way they were. And so I wanted to share that with you. So with knowing all of these things, with all of the stress that we're coming up against right now, life is stressful. Our jobs can be stressful. And adding this anti-Semitism and what we're feeling right now is stressful as well. What can we do for self-care? How can we move our bodies on a regular basis? Get out of the house, get some sunlight. They talk about getting first light. First light, grounding yourself on some sort of actual ground with grass, helping yourself get out, engaging in communities like this, and practicing mindfulness. So the question is, how do you self-care? Maybe write some things in the chat. How do you self-care? How do you self-care? Write some things in the chat. I'll read it out. Actually, Peter Anthony's here tonight. I hope it's okay that I wrote this in the slide because it hit me so hard. How can you be a better friend to yourself? And I love that question. We don't ask ourselves that question enough, but we truly need to be a better friend to ourselves. We need to be able to care about our physical well-being, our mental well-being, and this idea that we can write things down and understand what we have control over. What we have control over right now is going to be crucial for us. Can you go to the next slide? And so, what do you have control over? And I created this nice slide called What is on Your Plate? And this is taken from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the idea is that we can focus on what we can control. What can you control right now? So you could, just like the stories, you could be stuck in your thoughts, the news, the election that's coming up, our stress, unworthiness, anger with a family member. We could be focused on those things, or we can really focus on what we can control. A lot of those things on that plate are things we can't control. The idea here is that what we can control is what I call the intelligence of the moment. The intelligence of the moment is what is coming through right now. What is present in this moment right now? Can we look down at ourselves from the balcony and see ourselves in our chairs and gain the self-awareness that we need? Can we show up with curiosity? Can we do all of these other things? So let's talk about naming the year. one of the things that I got really interested in was journaling. And I wanted to share a practice with you. If we have time, we'll go and we'll talk about this a little bit more if we have time. But the idea here is that you're going to focus on what you can control. And so I've created my own little way of journaling. And what I love to do is name every year. And as we go into the new year, we might personally, and this is just an idea, come up with the name for this year personally. So we come up with a personal name. Maybe we come up with a collective name for this year. We might do that as Kesher Shalom, as a group tonight. But what is it that we're going to do as the name of the year? Give it a theme. And then in these different aspects, and take a picture of this slide for sure. Self-care, personal growth, relationships, career, and financial success. What do we want to happen in those areas? How do we want to journal those things? How do we want to go back to those things on a regular basis and start to author our lives and take control over what we can take control over? There are so many things that we can't control. And we saw that by the plate. There's a lot of things we can't control, but there's a lot of things you can control. And that is your own attitude, the way you're showing up and how you're behaving in different circumstances. So I want to challenge you all today. I've been doing a lot of challenges. So if you want to take the challenge, let me know in the chat. Are you going to take the challenge to write in your journal, naming your year and breaking out some goals for yourself? Is this something that you want to start doing? Is this something that is interesting to you? So write that down in the chat as well. I see some yeses. Lana says yes, and other people saying yes as well. And we are definitely moving into the closing of the session tonight, but I hope that you guys do that. And I will also give you my contact information in the chat in case you have any questions, how I do this or the practice that I use. But thank you so much for letting me share this. I want to hear, while we're ending the room tonight, maybe we'll close the session, but before we leave, I'd like to hear a few people what you're taking away from tonight and some of the things that we've said. Malka, back to you.
Thank you, Julie. That was amazing. So before we close, we were planning on doing a breakout room. Julie, is there a way that they could pick which breakout room they go to?
Then we would just do 2 breakout rooms.
I was thinking they could choose to go with you for journaling, Gina to practice some of the grounding, and me for the reflection questions.
Okay. Yeah. So we just have to tell them 1 will be Gina, 2 will be you, and I'll be 3.
So we're going to have like a 7-minute breakout and then we'll wrap up. Okay.
Okay. So it'll be Gina 1, Malka 2, Julie 3. Are you guys able to choose?
There is no choice right now.
Yes, I see a choice.
Okay, scroll all the way down to the end and you'll see where it says rooms. It'll say 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so what number am I, Julie?
You're 2, I'm 3,
I'm
Gina's
sorry, where do you see that? I went to more, I don't see anything. Where do you see that?
Can you put Gina in her room so she knows which room to go to?
Yeah, I think I can
There's
do
nowhere to see him.
I don't see it either.
I don't either.
Oh, wait.
Scroll
Oh,
all the
oh.
way down to the bottom.
It's under
Okay.
more, where you say more. I
Where?
think.
I went to more,
What's
I
there?
didn't see any.
It was
breakout.
join breakout.
Oh,
room.
Jane,
You should be able on the bottom. You click on that.
I don't
And
see
you
it.
click on the room.
Okay, tell me, for those of you who cannot see it, I'll put you in the room. Amy, what room do you want to go to?
There's no rooms.
Who's asking there's no rooms?
Andrea, me.
Okay, what room did you want to go to?
2.
Okay. Scott, what room do you want to go to? I'm going to send you to my room. Marjorie, what room do you want to go to?
Could you repeat the rooms again, Julie?
Oh, Gina's 1, Malka's 2, and I'm 3.
Okay.
Can I go to room 1?
Yep. Was that Peter? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Marjorie, what room do you want to go to?
Which one is Malka's room?
2.
2. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share my screen and we're going to just kind of conclude for tonight. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So I love Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. I feel like he is somebody who speaks to everybody in our heart and souls. And I just thought that the next 2 slides are a really great way to kind of close out the evening. I do want to say that I hope that everybody will fill out the feedback form because the feedback form is really critical. There's also going to be another Rise Above for the California, for the West Coast coming up, and having the feedback form will help us to even put that program together. Do I have a volunteer that wants to either read one or both of the quotes just to kind of close up the room for tonight?
I will.
Okay, Marjorie, why don't you read the top one?
Okay. All of us are, in some sense, survivors. To be a Jew is to carry the burden of memory without letting it rob us of hope and faith in the possibility of a world at peace.
Thank you so much. Do I have a volunteer to read the bottom quote? Go, Jody.
If we want to fight anti-Semitism, let us walk tall and proud as Jews, and let us work with all humanity to banish hatred forever.
I couldn't sum it up any better than Rabbi Sachs. And we just want to let you know that, Kesher Shalom Projects is really here for partnership, education, and inspiration. And well, actually, now I'm going to say it's Kesher Shalom Projects and Mental Health is Real because we're now partnering together. And we want everyone to work towards combating anti-Semitism and really being that light into the nations and working on our Tikkun Olam. More than ever, we need to be united. So say it with me if you'd like. Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Okay, does Gina or Julie have any ending things they would like to end with?
No, just lovely to have you here listening and wanting to learn more. And we hope that we could keep continuing this circle of learning. Thank you for the opportunity, Malka.
Oh, thank you. Julie, do you have anything that you want to end with?
I just want to say thank you to everybody. And my challenge for you tonight is to name this new year and write in your journals and start telling yourselves the stories you need to tell yourself to be happy, joyous, and be successful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shana Tova lekulam.
Shana
Oh,
Tova.
that was beautiful. Shana Tova. So the recording stopped. The event is officially over.